When my mom said I was going to spend the weekend at Uncle Bill's farm, I wasn't exactly thrilled. I was 15 and preferred to spend my weekends gaming or hanging out with my friends, not in the middle of nowhere. But it was a family thing, and my mom insisted, so off I went. Uncle Bill's farm was in the kind of rural area where all you could hear was nothing but the wind and, every now and then, the distant bark of a dog echoing in the background. It was November, and the farm was gearing up for the last big corn harvest of the season. Rows and rows of dried stalks stretched out as far as I could see, like a golden brown ocean. There was something oddly peaceful about it. On the first day, Uncle Bill gave me a tour of the farm, just as he did every time I visited. I humored him, listening to his stories about how this land had been in the family for generations, but I was mostly just biding my time. He showed me the fields, the tractor, the barn, and then, almost like he'd been saving the best for last, the scarecrows. There were 3 of them, spaced out along the field. Tall, lanky things dressed in old, weather-beaten clothes that probably came from Uncle Bill's closet. Their faces were burlap sacks with button eyes and wide, toothy grins stitched in red thread. For some reason, something about them didn't sit well with me. Maybe it was the fact that they didn't have hats, so their heads were these strange bare lumps on top of the bodies. Or maybe it was the way the wind made their arms sway ever so slightly, like they were beckoning you closer. "You like 'em?" Uncle Bill asked, clearly proud of his handiwork. "Been using those same fellas for years. Keep the birds away real good." I forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, they're effective." Uncle Bill chuckled. "You city kids don't see stuff like this much, huh? Well, they've done the trick for as long as I can remember." He led me back toward the house, and I kept looking back at the scarecrows. Something about them felt off. But I didn't overthink it and just let it go. It was just a couple of scarecrows, nothing to be freaked out about. That night, I found myself in the guest room, scrolling through my phone and half watching the news. Uncle Bill had gone to bed early, exhausted from the day's work. The farm was dead quiet, and the only light came from the dim lamp by my bed. I wasn't used to this kind of stillness. The city was always alive with energy, but out here you could hear every creak of the old house, every gust of wind that rattled the windows. Around midnight, I started hearing this weird tapping noise against the window. At first I ignored it, figuring it was a branch or maybe just the wind, but it kept going. Curiosity got the better of me, so I got up and pulled the curtains aside. I expected to see nothing, just darkness and maybe a few swaying trees, but instead I saw something that made my stomach tighten. One of the scarecrows was in the yard, right there, maybe 20 feet from the house. Now, I knew Uncle Bill hadn't moved any of them. I'd seen them in the field earlier, and they were still far off by the time we came in for dinner. But here one was, standing eerily close to the house, its button eyes gleaming in the moonlight. And for a moment, I wondered if it had always been that close and I just hadn't noticed. But no, there was no way I could have missed it. I stared at it for a few more seconds, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank. Maybe Uncle Bill had moved it to mess with me? He had a weird sense of humor sometimes. But then I remembered that Uncle Bill had been passed out for hours. I was pretty sure he hadn't left his bed. I told myself that maybe I had just imagined it being farther out earlier. So I closed the curtains and went back to bed. But sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the scarecrow's crooked grin and its empty button eyes watching me. The next morning, I went out to the yard, mostly just to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. Sure enough, the scarecrow was still there, right where I'd seen it the night before. Its long, straw-stuffed arms hung limply by its sides, but something was different now. The red stitching that made up its grin was smudged. It looked wrong, almost like it had been tampered with. I walked over to it, kind of expecting it to move. It didn't. It was just a lifeless sack of straw and old clothes. Still, I didn't want to touch it. Something about the whole situation felt off. So I headed back to the house and found Uncle Bill sipping his coffee at the kitchen table. "Hey, Uncle Bill, did you move one of the scarecrows last night?" He looked up from his cup, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's one in the yard. I saw it last night and it's still there." Uncle Bill set his coffee down. I didn't move any scarecrows. They're supposed to be out in the field. I shrugged, playing it off. Weird. Maybe the wind blew it over. Uncle Bill didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Could be. Or maybe one of the neighbor kids thought they'd play a little joke. I'll move it back later. I didn't mention it again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I spent the rest of the day helping Uncle Bill with the harvest, trying to focus on the work and not on the scarecrow, which had been standing vigil in the yard all morning. By the time night fell, I was exhausted. I ate dinner, took a shower, and went to bed early, hoping I'd sleep better this time. But when I pulled the curtains closed, I noticed something strange. The scarecrow was gone. I hadn't seen Uncle Bill move it, and there was no way it could have walked off on its own. I tried to brush it off, but a nagging sense of unease settled over me. Sometime after midnight, I was jolted awake by a loud thud against the window. My heart raced as I sat up. Another thud, and another. It was like someone was throwing rocks at the window. I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. There, standing in the yard again, were not one but all three of the scarecrows. They were arranged in a line, their heads tilted slightly as if they were watching the house. I stared at them. They hadn't been there earlier. Uncle Bill couldn't have moved all three of them in the middle of the night, especially not without me hearing him. I stumbled back from the window, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I heard a knock coming from the front door. The knocking continued, soft but insistent, like someone trying to be polite, even though it was the dead of night. I made my way to the bedroom door. I opened it slowly, my ears straining for any sign of Uncle Bill. Nothing. The house was silent, except for the tapping at the front door. I crept down the hallway, every step making the old wooden floor creak. I went down the stairs, and as I reached the bottom, I looked toward the window by the door. The scarecrows were still out there, unmoving, just beyond the reach of the porch light. The knocking stopped. I stood there, unsure of what to do. Should I open the door? Call for Uncle Bill? My phone was upstairs, charging by the bed. I didn't want to leave the doorway unguarded long enough to grab it. Then, the doorknob turned. I froze, staring in disbelief as the knob twisted slowly. The door didn't open, it stayed locked, but whoever was on the other side was definitely trying to get in. Uncle Bill? I called, my voice shaking. There was no answer. The knob twisted again, then stopped. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. I bolted up the stairs, heading straight to Uncle Bill's room. I pounded on his door until I heard the groggy shuffle of him waking up. He opened the door, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? There's someone outside. They're trying to get in. Uncle Bill frowned and grabbed his shotgun from the closet, not asking any more questions. He led the way downstairs. When we reached the front door, he peered through the window cautiously. His eyes scanned the yard for a moment before he cursed under his breath. All the scarecrows are back, he muttered, tightening his grip on the shotgun. Back? What do you mean? Uncle Bill turned to me. They were gone this afternoon. I went to check on them, and they weren't there. We both stood in silence for a few seconds, listening for any signs of movement outside. Finally, Uncle Bill opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. I followed, keeping close behind him. The scarecrows were standing right where I'd seen them, just beyond the reach of the porch light, their button eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Uncle Bill raised his shotgun, but before he could take aim, a shadow moved behind one of the scarecrows. Get inside! Uncle Bill barked, shoving me back toward the door. He aimed the shotgun and fired, but it didn't hit anything. He fired 2 more shots into the darkness, which also didn't hit anything. Then Uncle Bill grabbed my arm and dragged me inside. We slammed the door shut and locked it. He bolted the door with his hands shaking. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the living room, silently, in the dark, Uncle Bill with his shotgun in hand waiting for someone or something to try to get in again. But that didn't happen. To this day, we don't know what that shadow was and who or what was carrying the scarecrows close to the house. I don't know if it was some kind of prank or something more serious, but one thing is for sure, it scared the hell out of me, and I'll never forget that night. Every fall, like clockwork, my family would make our annual pilgrimage to Pumpkinland. We'd pick out a pumpkin, carve goofy faces into them later, ride on the haunted hayride, and drink apple cider until we couldn't stomach another drop. But there was this one year, a year I'll never forget, that changed Pumpkinland from a cherished memory to a dark one that still creeps up on me whenever fall rolls around. I was about 9 years old, maybe 10, when it happened. It was one of those chilly autumn afternoons. The sky was clear, not a cloud in sight, and the entire park smelled like cinnamon, roasted peanuts, and the musty earth of a farm preparing for the long winter ahead. I remember everything about that day. The crunch of the leaves underfoot, the warmth of the wool sweater my mom had knitted for me, and the excitement buzzing in the air as families bustled around us. We arrived just after lunch. My dad in his usual baseball cap and flannel jacket, my mom snapping pictures with her old disposable camera, and me, well, I was darting ahead, already eager to hit the hay rides and corn maze. Dad had to remind me to slow down more than once. "You'll get lost if you run ahead like that," he'd say, but I never took him seriously. At Pumpkinland, it felt like nothing bad could ever happen. The first half of the day was a blur of fun. We picked out pumpkins, navigated the corn maze without too much argument about which way to go, and I ate enough caramel apples to last a lifetime. I remember wanting to ride the mini roller coaster they had set up at the far end of the park, but before that, I needed to use the bathroom. I told my dad, and we headed over to the porta potties near the entrance. "Go ahead, I'll wait right here," he said, motioning to the edge of the path where a few other parents stood. He had one hand in his pocket, the other holding a pumpkin spice coffee that my mom teased him about drinking. I dashed into the portable bathroom, scrunched my nose at the smell, and did what I needed to do. As I came out, I expected to see my dad standing right there where he said he'd be. Only, he wasn't. I looked around, confused. The crowd was thick, kids running around with plastic bags full of candy from the trick-or-treat stations, parents juggling hot drinks and taking pictures of their little ones. But there was no sign of my dad. "Dad?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the noise of the park. I was used to him being right where he said he'd be, so this was strange. I waited for a few minutes, thinking he must have just stepped away for a second, or maybe I had missed him in the crowd. I tried to convince myself it was no big deal, that I'd find him soon enough. But when the minutes dragged on and there was still no sign of him, a gnawing feeling started to settle in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I wandered a little further from the porta potties, trying to scan through the crowds of families and kids. I walked past the food stalls, searching for any sign of my dad's baseball cap in the sea of people, but he wasn't there. Now, let me explain something. I wasn't the kind of kid who panicked easily. I'd been told all the usual warnings. Don't talk to strangers, stay where your parents can see you. But in a place like Pumpkinland, it just felt safe. Everyone was there for the same reason. Everyone was in a good mood, and bad things didn't happen in places like this, right? At least that's what I thought. After a few more minutes, I saw a man approaching me. He was tall, older than my dad, with graying hair poking out from under a baseball cap. He wore one of those puffy vests that older guys seem to love, and there was a friendly, if slightly forced smile on his face. "You look a little lost, kiddo," he said, his voice smooth, almost too casual. "Are you trying to find someone?" I nodded, still looking around for my dad. "Yeah, my dad was supposed to wait for me, but I don't see him." The man gave a sympathetic nod and crouched down so that we were almost at eye level. "What's your dad look like? Maybe I've seen him around." I wasn't sure if I should talk to him. The warnings about not trusting strangers floated in the back of my mind, but this guy seemed okay, friendly enough. So I described my dad. The jacket, the hat, the coffee in his hand. The man listened carefully, his eyes narrowing just slightly like he was trying to recall someone matching the description. "I think I saw him by the corn maze a few minutes ago," he said, standing up. "I can walk you over there if you want." There was something about the offer that didn't sit right with me. The corn maze was all the way on the other side of the park. Why would my dad go there without me? He knew how excited I was to try the maze. Maybe," I mumbled, unsure. I hesitated, taking a step back. The man smiled again, but this time it didn't feel real. It never reached his eyes. "Your dad told me to come get you," he said, more firmly. "Said you were taking a little too long in the bathroom. Come on, I'll take you to him." That was the moment. That one sentence was when my mind shifted from confusion to fear. My dad would never send someone else to come get me, not without telling me. And the more I thought about it, the more this guy's story didn't add up. He was too eager, too insistent. I stepped back again, my unease growing. "I think I'll just wait here." The man's smile vanished for a split second. He looked around quickly, then back at me. "It'll be quicker if you come with me. I'm sure your dad's waiting." Something about his tone sent a surge of panic through me. I was just a kid, but I wasn't stupid. This wasn't right. Before I could react, before I could even think of what to say, I spotted a flash of orange, a Pumpkin Land employee's vest off to the side of the crowd. Without thinking, I turned and bolted toward the worker. "Hey, excuse me," I shouted, weaving through the crowd as fast as my legs could carry me. The employee, a guy about my dad's age, turned around just in time to see me running toward him. I could hear the man behind me calling out, but I didn't stop. I reached the employee and gasped out, "I can't find my dad." The worker immediately crouched down, concerned. "Hey, slow down, what's going on?" I looked back, but the man was already gone, melted into the crowd like he'd never been there at all. The worker looked around, but there was no one suspicious in sight. He led me to the security office, where within minutes, my dad showed up, breathless and panicked. He'd been looking for me the whole time, frantic when he realized I wasn't where he'd left me. I told him and the security team everything about the man, the offer to help, the lie about knowing my dad. They took it seriously, but with so many people in costumes and hats and no cameras in that part of the park, there wasn't much they could do. We never saw the man again. No one did. As I got older, I replayed that moment over and over in my mind, each time realizing just how close I came to something far worse than getting lost at a Halloween festival. At the time, I didn't understand the gravity of it, but now as an adult, I can see it clearly. That man wasn't just trying to be helpful. He was trying to lead me away from the safety of the crowd, away from where anyone could find me. The realization hit me hard later in life. What if I hadn't listened to that gut instinct? What if I had gone with him? It's not something I like to dwell on, but it's always there in the back of my mind, especially every time October rolls around. Pumpkin Land used to be a place of joy, of family memories and laughter. Now, though, it's a reminder of how quickly something can change, how easily a happy day can turn into something darker. We never went back there. Some places, once tainted, can never feel safe again. I never really considered myself an outdoorsy kind of guy, but when my girlfriend Jen suggested we go camping, I figured it wouldn't be that bad. Besides, it was late November, the leaves were beautiful, and she seemed excited about it. We'd been together for a while, and this felt like the kind of coupley thing that would get me some points. A weekend camping trip in the woods, just us, a tent, and a fire. What could go wrong, right? We left early Saturday morning, the car packed with everything we needed. Tent, sleeping bags, food, and enough firewood to last the night. The drive upstate was peaceful, the roads winding through forests already covered in that crisp golden fall glow. Jen had grown up around here, so she knew all the best spots for camping. She suggested a clearing near her dad's property, somewhere she used to go as a kid. It wasn't too far from the house, but far enough that we wouldn't be disturbed. Sounded perfect to me. After about an hour, we turned off the main road and drove down a dirt path until we reached the clearing. It was secluded and surrounded by towering trees. The light filtered through the branches in that soft autumn way, casting shadows that danced across the ground. Honestly, it was kind of beautiful. Jen was already out of the car, scouting the area for the best place to set up the tent. "This spot is perfect," she said, pointing toward a flat patch of ground near the edge of the clearing. "We can set up here, and the fire pit can go over there." I followed her lead. She was the camping expert, after all. We spent the next hour setting up the tent and getting everything organized. By the time we were done, the sun was beginning to set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. With the camp set up, we decided to relax for a bit before starting the fire. Jen pulled out a couple of beers from the cooler, and we sat down on the fold-out chairs, enjoying the silence. As the evening wore on, we started the fire and cooked some hot dogs over the flames. The warmth of the fire was a welcome contrast to the chill that was beginning to settle in. We talked about everything and nothing, just enjoying each other's company. It felt good to be out here, disconnected from the world. But as the night got darker, the whole atmosphere started to change. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just little things. Every now and then, I thought I heard something, a twig snapping, leaves crunching, but when I looked around, there was nothing. "You hear that?" I asked Jen, trying to sound casual. She looked up from poking the fire with a stick. "Hear what?" "I don't know. Like footsteps or something. Probably just an animal, right?" Jen shrugged, not seeming too concerned. "Probably. There's all kinds of wildlife out here. Deer, raccoons, maybe a fox. They're more scared of us than we are of them." That made sense. Still, I couldn't shake the weird feeling that we weren't alone out here. But I didn't want to freak Jen out, so I kept it to myself. We carried on with our evening, talking and laughing, trying to ignore the creeping cold that was settling in. At some point, we both got quiet, just staring into the fire. The kind of quiet where you're comfortable, but also a little lost in your thoughts. I was just about to suggest we call it a night when something caught my eye. At first, it was just movement, a dark shape slipping between the trees just outside the reach of the firelight. I stared into the woods, trying to convince myself it was nothing more than a deer or some other animal. "Jen, did you see that?" I asked quietly, not taking my eyes off the tree line. She looked up from the fire. "See what?" I pointed into the darkness. There was something moving. Jen squinted, leaning forward as if that would help her see better. "Probably just a raccoon or something," she said, but there was hesitation in her voice. I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. Whatever I'd seen seemed too tall, too human. But it was probably just my imagination getting the better of me. We sat there for another few minutes, both of us a little on edge now, listening to the sounds of the forest. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the soft rustling of an animal, but the distinct crunch of someone walking through the dry leaves. The sound seemed to come from behind us, just beyond the circle of light cast by the fire. I turned my head, and there it was again. Movement. This time it wasn't just one shadow. It was two, maybe three. Dark figures slipping between the trees, just far enough away that I couldn't make out any details. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Jen nodded slowly. "Yeah, I hear it." We both stood up at the same time, instinctively moving closer to each other. I looked at the tent, which suddenly felt like the most vulnerable place in the world. There was no way I was going in there now, not with whatever was out there, watching us. The footsteps stopped for a moment, and everything went quiet. Jen whispered, "Maybe it's just people hiking or something? It's a public trail, right?" I shook my head. "Not at this time of night. Nobody's hiking out here this late." We stood there, straining to hear anything else. And then the footsteps started again, this time from a different direction, closer, circling the campsite. "There's more than one," Jen muttered. I didn't need to be told twice. It was obvious now. The sounds were coming from all sides, surrounding us, the figures darting between the trees like they were playing some twisted game of hide and seek. "What do we do?" she asked. "We need to leave. Now." We both moved quickly, grabbing the essentials, keys, phone, flashlight. Forget the tent. Forget the chairs. We could come back for them in the daylight, but right now, getting out of there was all that mattered. As we packed up in a rush, I kept one eye on the woods, watching the dark shapes that seemed to melt in and out of the shadows. I couldn't tell how many there were, but the footsteps were getting louder, as if whatever was out there was closing in on us. We started walking toward the car, keeping low and quiet, trying not to make any sudden movements. Every few steps, I looked over my shoulder, thinking I'd see someone step out of the trees and block our path. The tension in the air was suffocating, the sense of being watched overwhelming. And then, out of nowhere, a branch snapped loudly to our left. "Go," I whispered sharply, and we broke into a run, sprinting toward the car. Behind us, the footsteps quickened too, like they were chasing us, but I didn't dare turn around to look. We made it to the car, and I fumbled with the keys for a second, my hands shaking. Finally, I got the door unlocked, and we both scrambled inside, slamming the doors shut behind us. For a moment, everything was still. The figures didn't come into view. "Drive," Jen urged, her voice tight with fear. I started the car, slammed into reverse, backing up quickly before spinning the wheel and heading down the dirt road. The trees blurred past us as we sped away from the campsite. As we drove, I looked into the rearview mirror, expecting to see someone, but there was nothing. The dark shapes had melted back into the forest, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. We kept driving until we reached Jen's dad's cabin. It was nearly morning by then, and the first light of dawn was starting to break through the trees. We parked the car and sat there for a moment, just trying to process what had just happened. "I don't know what that was," Jen said finally, "but I'm never going back there again." I agreed. We were lucky we'd gotten away. We never went back to that campsite. We didn't even bother going back for the tent. In fact, we never went camping again. I was 13, and it was supposed to be just another night of messing around, something to kill the boredom that always set in as fall dragged on in our small town. Me, Jose, Tara, and Micah had been hanging out all day doing nothing in particular when Jose came up with this idea of doing something a little more daring. "You guys ever heard about the old pumpkin patch on Mill Road?" Tara replied, "That place is abandoned. Has been for years. They say it's haunted or some crap." "Exactly," Jose said. "We should check it out." We weren't the type to pass up a dare, but I could tell we were hesitant. There was always something off about that side of town, run down, overgrown, the kind of place you avoided without really thinking about it. But boredom does strange things to people, and before I knew it, we were pedaling our bikes down the dark road toward the old farm. It was dusk by the time we reached the overgrown path that led to the pumpkin patch. We ditched our bikes near a rusted-out gate and walked the rest of the way. The place was just as run down as I'd imagined. Weeds and dead corn stalks stretched across the fields, and in the distance, the farmhouse loomed. "You sure about this?" Micah muttered. Jose didn't hesitate. "Come on, it's just an old farm. Nothing to be scared of." I wasn't convinced either, but we followed anyway, walking down the dirt path toward the house. The closer we got, the weirder the place felt. Something about the way the house stood there, alone and decaying, made my skin itch. It was the kind of place you see in horror movies, the kind of place where you expect something to jump out at you any minute. When we reached the front door, it was already half open. None of us made a move to enter. "I'll go first," I said, feeling a strange need to prove something, though I wasn't sure what. I pushed the door open the rest of the way, and it creaked loudly, echoing into the emptiness inside. As we stepped inside, the walls were lined with peeling wallpaper. Furniture was still scattered around, like whoever lived here had just up and left one day and never came back. A layer of dust covered everything, making it clear that no one had set foot in here for years. "Man, this place is a dump," Jose said. "What a waste of time." But as he said it, something thudded from upstairs. We all stopped. "What the hell was that?" Tara asked. "Probably just some window closing in the wind," Jose said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Then it happened again. A rhythmic thumping, like someone was hitting the wall upstairs. There was no way it was the wind or the house shifting. The sound was too deliberate, too controlled. "Maybe we should leave," Micah suggested. "You guys are paranoid. Let's just check it out." None of us really wanted to go upstairs, but something about that noise pulled us, like we had to see what was making it. So, against every ounce of common sense, we climbed the creaky stairs, one step at a time. The thumping grew louder the higher we went. When we reached the top, there was a long hallway with several doors, all of them closed except one at the far end. That's where the noise was coming from. "I don't like this," Tara whispered, clutching onto Micah's arm. "We'll just take a quick look," Jose said, though I noticed his bravado had faded. We walked down the hall. The closer we got to the open door, the more I regretted coming here. Something was very, very wrong. Jose and I reached the doorway first, and we both stopped dead in our tracks. Inside the room was a man. He was standing in the corner, facing the wall, his head slowly knocking against it over and over. The sound reverberated through the room like a nightmare. "Holy shit," Jose whispered. I didn't move. None of us did. We just stood there, watching this man, if you could call him that, continuing to bang his head against the wall as if he didn't even know we were there. Is he okay? Tara finally asked, her voice shaky. But there was no answer, just the sound of his head hitting the wall. We need to go. We bolted down the hallway. Behind us, I could hear the man's footsteps chasing us. We flew down the stairs, nearly tripping in our panic. When we reached the front door, I heard a scream. I didn't dare look back. We tore through the doorway and out into the yard, running as fast as we could toward our bikes. As we jumped on and pedaled away, I could still hear that scream echoing through the night. We didn't stop pedaling until we were halfway back to town, our legs burning from the effort. What was that? Tara asked. I shook my head, too out of breath to speak. There was something deeply wrong with that place, something we never should have messed with. When we finally made it back to town, we stopped at the park, collapsing onto the grass, gasping for air. None of us spoke for a long time. We never told anyone what happened at the abandoned pumpkin patch, and we never went back. I still wonder what we would have seen if we had looked back as we ran. But part of me is glad I never found out. If these fall stories creeped you out, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe for more spine-tingling content. Which story scared you the most? Drop it in the comments below and let me know. Don't forget to share this video with friends who love a good scare. Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are hiding in plain sight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.